Everything began the night the stars fell silent. It was late autumn in the fields of southern Montana, where the wheat had long been harvested, and the earth lay bare under a sky so vast it seemed to swallow the soul. The wind had stopped, not slowed, stopped, as if the world itself had drawn a breath and forgotten to release it. And in that unnatural stillness, something ancient stirred. His name was Samuel Carver, though most folks just called him Sam. He was a wheat farmer, 53 years old, with hands like old leather and a heart that had grown quieter with each passing season. His wife had died 4 years prior, cancer, the kind that takes you slow and robs you of everything soft before it finally lets go. His daughter lived in Seattle now, called twice a month, spoke in polite distances. Sam had learned to live with the silence, or so he told himself. That November night, he sat on the porch of his farmhouse, a mug of cold coffee in his hands, watching the horizon as he always did, waiting for nothing, expecting less. The stars above him were sharp and cold, ancient fires that had burned since before memory, before names, before the first human looked up and wondered if there was more. And then, without warning, they stopped. Not disappeared, stopped, frozen, as if time itself had paused to witness something unspeakable. Sam felt his chest tighten, his breath caught. The air around him thickened, became almost liquid, pressing against his skin like invisible hands. And then he saw it. A light. Not a light like headlights on a distant road or the glow of a town beyond the hills. This was something else. It came from above, descending slowly, silently, with a grace that defied physics. It was not white, nor gold, nor any color he had a name for. It shifted, pulsed, as if it were breathing. And as it came closer, Sam realized with a cold certainty that it was not coming toward the earth. It was coming toward him. He should have run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to move, to hide, to do anything but sit there like a fool. But he couldn't. His legs refused to obey. His hands gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles white, heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner begging for release. And still the light descended. When it was perhaps 100 feet above the field, it stopped, hovering, silent. And from within that impossible glow, something began to take shape. At first, Sam thought it was a man, tall, slender, with limbs that moved too smoothly, too deliberately. But as the figure stepped out of the light, walked though there was nothing beneath it but air, Sam saw that it was not a man at all. Its skin, if it could be called skin, shimmered like oil on water, reflecting colors that had no place in the natural world. Its eyes were large, dark, and filled with something that Sam could only describe as sorrow, deep, ancient sorrow. The being stopped at the edge of the porch. It did not speak, did not move. It simply looked at him, and in that gaze, Sam felt something crack open inside his chest. A door he had sealed shut the day his wife took her last breath. Grief poured out, raw and unfiltered, but so did something else. Something he had no name for. And then, without words, it spoke, not in his ears, but in his mind, in his heart, in the marrow of his bones. The voice was not one voice, but many, male and female, young and old, human and not. It resonated through him like a tuning fork struck against the fabric of existence itself. Samuel Carver, it said, and the sound of his name in that voice made him want to weep. You have been chosen to see what others have forgotten, to remember what was erased, to know the truth that sleeps beneath the stones. Sam's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His mind raced, grasping for logic, for reason, for anything that could make sense of what was happening. But there was no sense to be found, only the being standing before him, patient as eternity. Come, it said, there is little time and much to show you. And before Sam could protest, before he could even think to resist, the world around him dissolved into light. When his vision cleared, he was no longer on his porch. He was no longer in Montana. He was not even, he realized, with a shock that stole his breath on earth. He stood on a plane of glass, no, not glass, something harder, smoother, that reflected the stars above in perfect clarity. The sky was different here, blacker, deeper. The stars were not points of light, but rivers of fire, twisting and turning in patterns that hurt to look at. And in the distance, rising from the plain like the bones of a fallen god, was a structure. It was massive, impossibly so. A circle of stones, each one taller than any building Sam had ever seen, arranged with a precision that defied comprehension. They were not rough or weathered. They gleamed, polished to a mirror finish, and within them, light moved. Not reflected light, but light that seemed to come from within the stones themselves, pulsing in rhythms that matched the beating of his heart. The being stood beside him, silent, watching. "This," it said, "is where it began. Not the beginning of your world, Samuel, the beginning of the lie." Sam tried to speak, but his voice came out as a whisper. What is this place?" "This is the first Stonehenge, the original, built not by hands but by will. Not by humans but by those who came before. The Anunnaki, as your ancient texts called them. But they were not gods, Samuel. They were builders, architects of civilizations, and they did not come to conquer. They came to teach." Sam's mind struggled to process the words. The Anunnaki. He had heard the name before, in documentaries he'd half-watched late at night, in books his wife used to read about ancient mysteries. But those were myths, stories. Weren't they? The being turned to him, and for the first time Sam saw something like compassion in those dark, sorrowful eyes. "Your species has a gift, Samuel, a gift that even the Anunnaki did not possess. You call it faith, the ability to believe in what you cannot see, to hope for what seems impossible, to love beyond reason. The Anunnaki recognized this. They saw in humanity a potential that terrified them, and so they taught you. They showed you how to move stone, how to read the stars, how to build monuments that would last millennia. But they did not do it for themselves. They did it for you, so that one day, when the time came, you would remember." "Remember what?" Sam's voice was stronger now, though his hands still trembled. "That you were never alone. That the Creator, the one you call God, the one others call by 1,000 different names, did not create only one garden. He created many. And the Anunnaki were the gardeners of worlds, planting seeds of consciousness across the stars. Earth was one such seed, and Stonehenge, the one on your world, was the monument they built to mark the planting. A gateway, a memory in stone." Sam stared at the towering structure before him. The light within the stones pulsed faster now, matching his racing heartbeat. "But the Druids, the people who built it, they were human." "Yes," the being said, and there was a sadness in its voice that made Sam's chest ache. "They were human, but they were also taught. The Anunnaki came to your world long before your recorded history. They walked among your ancestors, not as gods, but as teachers. They showed them the stars, the seasons, the sacred geometry that binds all creation, and when the time came, they left. But they did not leave you helpless. They left you Stonehenge, a reminder, a beacon, and a warning." "A warning?" Sam whispered. The being gestured toward the stones, and suddenly the light within them flared, blinding and beautiful. Images began to form in the glow, visions, memories, histories that had never been written down. Sam saw figures in robes, faces painted with symbols he did not recognize, standing in circles around massive stones. He saw the Anunnaki among them, tall and luminous, guiding hands, shaping rock with tools that hummed with energy. He saw the stones being raised, not by ropes or levers, but by sound, deep, resonant tones that made the very air vibrate. The stones lifted as if weightless, floating into place with a precision that seemed divine. And then he saw the Druids, not the mystical, nature-worshipping figures of legend, but something else. Scientists, astronomers, keepers of knowledge so profound it had been deliberately erased from history. They wore white robes and carried staffs carved with symbols that matched the constellations above. They were not primitive, they were brilliant. "The Druids," the being said, "were the last of the true inheritors, the final students of the Anunnaki. They understood the purpose of Stonehenge. They knew it was not just a temple or a calendar. It was a machine, a device designed to harmonize the energy of the earth with the energy of the heavens, to keep the balance, to prevent the darkness from consuming your world." "Darkness," Sam's voice cracked. "There are forces in this universe, Samuel, that you cannot see. Energies that feed on despair, on hatred, on the forgetting of who you truly are. The Anunnaki knew this. They built Stonehenge as a shield, a focal point of light that would keep those forces at bay. And the Druids maintained it, generation after generation, until the vision shifted. Sam saw soldiers, Roman soldiers clad in armor marching through forests. He saw fire, he saw slaughter, he saw the Druids, those keepers of ancient wisdom, hunted down and killed. He saw their books burned, their temples destroyed, their knowledge scattered to the winds. And he saw Stonehenge abandoned, left to weather and time, its purpose forgotten. The Romans did not know what they destroyed, the being said quietly. They thought they were conquering barbarians. They did not realize they were severing the connection between your world and the light that sustained it. And in the centuries that followed, as the knowledge of the Druids faded into myth, the darkness began to creep back. Sam's legs gave out. He sank to his knees on the glassy plain, tears streaming down his face. "Why are you telling me this? Why me?" The being knelt beside him, and for the first time, it reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was warm, real. And in that moment, Sam felt a love so vast, so overwhelming, that it shattered every wall he had ever built around his heart. Because the time is coming, Samuel, the time of awakening, the time when humanity must remember who they are, where they came from, and why they were placed on this earth. The Creator has not forgotten you. He has been waiting, watching, and now the veil is lifting. Those who have eyes to see will see. Those who have ears to hear will hear. And those who have hearts open enough to believe, they will be transformed. Is this the rapture?" Sam's voice was barely a whisper. "The return of Jesus?" The being smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing Sam had ever seen. Jesus was one of many who came to remind you. Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, prophets and teachers across the ages, all speaking the same truth in different tongues. The Creator does not have one face, Samuel. He has all faces. And yes, there is a transformation coming, a lifting, a returning, but it will not be as your scriptures describe. It will be stranger, more wonderful, more terrifying. It will be the moment when humanity finally remembers that they are not alone, that they never were, and that the love that created them is vast beyond measure. When Sam opened his eyes, he was back on his porch. The stars were moving again, spinning slowly in their ancient dance. The wind had returned, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant rain. His coffee mug sat beside him, still cold. The clock on the wall inside the house read 11:47 p.m. Only minutes had passed, but Sam knew it had been longer, much longer. He stood on shaking legs and walked to the edge of the porch, staring out at the dark fields. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. He could feel it, a hum in his chest, a vibration in his bones, as if the entire world was singing a song just below the range of hearing. And for the first time in 4 years, he did not feel alone. Over the following days, Sam tried to return to his routine. He woke at dawn, fed the chickens, checked the equipment, drove into town for supplies. But everything felt distant now, as if he were watching his life from behind glass. People spoke to him, and he nodded, smiled, responded appropriately. But their words seemed hollow, their concerns trivial. He had seen something they had not, known something they could not, and it changed everything. At night, he sat on the porch and stared at the stars, waiting, hoping. But the being did not return. The light did not descend, and slowly the doubt began to creep in. Had it been real, or had he simply fallen asleep and dreamed it all? Maybe he was losing his mind. Maybe grief had finally broken something inside him that couldn't be fixed. He told himself these things over and over, trying to convince himself that what he had experienced was nothing more than a hallucination, a trick of an exhausted mind. But then, 1 week after the encounter, something happened that shattered every doubt. Sam had driven into town to pick up feed from the supply store. As he loaded the bags into the bed of his truck, a young woman approached him. She was perhaps 30, with tired eyes and a baby on her hip. Sam recognized her vaguely. She worked at the diner on Main Street, had moved to town a year or two ago from somewhere back east. "Excuse me," she said, her voice hesitant. "Are you Sam Carver?" He nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That's me." She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide something. Then, quietly, she said, "I had a dream about you last night. I know that sounds crazy, but I had to find you. I had to tell you." Sam's heart began to pound. "A dream?" She nodded. "There was a light and a voice. It told me to find the farmer with the quiet eyes. It said you would understand, that you'd seen it too." She paused, her eyes glistening. "It told me that my son is going to be okay, that the cancer won't take him, that I just have to believe." Sam stared at her, his breath caught in his throat. He glanced down at the baby in her arms, saw the faint scar on the child's head where surgeries had been performed. His hands began to shake. "What else did it say?" he whispered. "It said..." She swallowed hard, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It said that the stones remember, that the light never left, that we just forgot how to see it." Sam felt his knees weaken. He gripped the side of the truck to steady himself. "Your son," he said, his voice hoarse. "What's his name?" "Daniel," she whispered. Sam reached out and placed a hand gently on the baby's head. He didn't know why. He didn't plan it. But the moment his fingers touched the child's soft hair, he felt it. The hum, the vibration. The same energy he had felt on that glassy plain beneath alien stars. It moved through him, warm and electric, flowing from his chest, down his arm, and into the boy. The baby's eyes opened, clear and bright, and for just a moment Sam could have sworn he saw light reflected in them. Light that came from nowhere. The woman gasped. "What? What did you just—" Sam pulled his hand back, his heart racing. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but take him back to the doctor next week. Just have them check again." She stared at him, confusion and hope warring on her face. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay, I will." She turned and walked away. The baby clutched tight against her chest, and Sam stood there in the parking lot, trembling, as the truth settled over him like a weight. It had been real, all of it, and something had changed inside him. Something he didn't understand, something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. 2 weeks later, the woman returned. She found him in the fields, working on a broken irrigation line, and ran toward him, sobbing. Sam stood alarmed, but before he could speak, she threw her arms around him. "They ran the tests," she choked out. "They ran them 3 times. The tumor is gone. It's just gone. The doctors can't explain it. They're calling it spontaneous remission, but—" She pulled back, looking up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "It was you, wasn't it? Whatever you did that day." Sam shook his head slowly. "It wasn't me," he said quietly. "I'm just a farmer. I don't have that kind of power." "Then what?" she demanded. "What happened?" He looked at her for a long moment, then up at the sky where clouds drifted lazily across the blue. "I think," he said softly, "that maybe we're not as alone as we think we are. And maybe grace has more faces than we were taught." She stared at him, searching his face for answers he couldn't give. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "Whatever it was, thank you." She left, and Sam returned to his work. But the word spread, quietly at first, in whispers shared over coffee at the diner, in murmured conversations after church on Sunday. People began to look at him differently, some with curiosity, some with suspicion, a few with something that looked like reverence. Sam hated it. He didn't want to be special, didn't want to be seen. He just wanted to go back to his quiet life, his empty house, his predictable routines. But that life was gone now, burned away in the light of that impossible night. He began to change, not in ways others could see, but in ways he felt. The grief that had weighed on him for 4 years didn't disappear, but it softened, became something he could carry without being crushed by it. He started waking earlier, not because he had to, but because he wanted to see the sunrise. He found himself smiling at strangers in town, helping neighbors without being asked, speaking with a gentleness that surprised even him. And at night, when he sat on his porch and looked up at the stars, he no longer felt empty. He felt connected, as if invisible threads linked him to every light in the sky, every blade of grass in his fields, every beating heart in the world. It was overwhelming and comforting all at once. One evening, as autumn deepened into winter, Sam drove out to a place he hadn't visited in years, a small hilltop overlooking the valley, where he and his wife used to go to watch the sunset. He sat on the hood of his truck, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and stared at the horizon as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And as he sat there, he felt it again, the presence, the warmth, not the being this time, just the echo of it, the memory of that vast, sorrowful, loving gaze. "You are doing well, Samuel," the voice whispered, not from outside, but from within. "You are remembering." Tears slipped down his cheeks, but he was smiling. "I don't understand any of this," he said aloud to the empty air. "I don't know what you want from me." "We want nothing," the voice replied gently. "We give. That is the way of light. You have been given a glimpse, Samuel, a reminder. What you do with it is your choice. But know this, every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, every time you choose love over fear, you are rebuilding Stonehenge. Stone by stone, heart by heart. You are restoring the connection that was lost." "And Jesus," Sam whispered, "where is he in all of this?" "He is here," the voice said, and it was filled with such tenderness that Sam's chest ached. "He has always been here, not in the heavens, waiting to return, but in you, in every soul that chooses to love. He is not a man, Samuel. He is a frequency, a vibration, the resonance of the Creator's love made manifest. And yes, there will come a day when that frequency will rise, and those who match it will be lifted, but it will not be a separation. It will be a reuniting, a remembering, a coming home. Sam closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw it again, the circle of stones glowing with inner light. He saw the Anunnaki, those ancient teachers, standing beside humans, working together to build something beautiful. He saw the Druids, those keepers of wisdom, walking through forests and speaking to the stars. And he saw himself, standing in his fields, a simple farmer with dirt under his nails and light in his chest. "I'm ready," he whispered. "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." The presence faded, but the warmth remained, and Sam sat on that hilltop, wrapped in his blanket, until the stars emerged one by one, filling the sky with their ancient fire. Winter came, and with it, a quiet transformation. Sam didn't preach. He didn't tell people what he had seen, didn't try to convince anyone of anything. He simply lived differently. When his neighbor's tractor broke down, Sam helped fix it without being asked. When the widow 2 farms over ran out of firewood, he delivered a cord and refused payment. When the young man at the hardware store looked lost and afraid, Sam bought him coffee and listened. Word spread, though Sam never understood how. People started showing up at his farm, hesitant and hopeful, asking if the stories were true, if he really could heal, if he had really seen something. Sam always said the same thing. "I'm no one special. I'm just a man who saw a light. And that light showed me that we're all connected, that love is real, that we're not alone." Some believed him, some didn't. But everyone who came left feeling lighter somehow, as if Sam carried something contagious, not a disease, but a kind of peace that couldn't be contained. One day in early December, a pastor from the local church visited. He was a younger man, earnest and nervous, and he sat on Sam's porch with a Bible in his lap, clearly unsure how to begin. "I've heard things," the pastor said finally, "about you, about miracles, and I wanted to make sure you were still walking with the Lord." Sam smiled faintly. "I'm walking," he said. "Maybe not the path you'd expect, but I'm walking." The pastor frowned. "These stories, Sam, about aliens, about ancient gods, that's not Christianity. He hesitated. "That's dangerous." Sam looked at him for a long moment, then gestured to the sky. "Tell me, Pastor, how big do you think God is?" The question caught the younger man off guard. What? How big?" Sam repeated gently. "Is he big enough to create 1 billion galaxies? 1 trillion stars? Or is he small enough to fit in a book, in a building, in one religion?" The pastor opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I'm not saying I have all the answers," Sam continued quietly. "I don't. But I saw something out there, something vast and beautiful and terrifying, and it told me that God, the Creator, whatever name you want to use, is bigger than we can imagine, that Jesus was real and his message was true, but that he wasn't the only one speaking truth. That light has many languages, and maybe it's time we stopped arguing about the words and started listening to the song." The pastor sat in silence for a long time, staring at the Bible in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "I don't know if I can believe that." "You don't have to," Sam said kindly, "but maybe just sit with the possibility. That's all I'm asking." The pastor left without another word. But 3 days later he returned. This time he didn't bring a Bible, he brought questions, and Sam answered them as best he could, not with certainty, but with openness, with humility, with the understanding that neither of them had all the answers, but that seeking together was better than standing alone. On Christmas Eve, Sam sat alone in his farmhouse, a fire crackling in the hearth. His daughter had called earlier, apologizing that she couldn't make it home this year, work, she said, and maybe next year. He had told her it was okay, that he understood, and for the first time, he meant it. As midnight approached, Sam bundled up and walked out into the cold, his breath misting in the frigid air. The sky was clear, stars blazing overhead in their silent majesty. He walked to the center of his largest field and stood there, arms at his sides, face tilted toward the heavens. "Thank you," he said softly, "for showing me, for reminding me, for letting me be part of something bigger." The stars did not answer. The wind did not carry voices, but Sam felt it anyway, a presence, vast and warm, wrapping around him like a blanket. And in that moment he understood something profound. The being had not come to give him power. It had come to remind him of the power he already had, the power every human had, the power to choose love over fear, to choose connection over isolation, to choose faith over despair. Stonehenge had not been built by alien hands alone. It had been built by humans working together, guided by wisdom from beyond, creating something that would endure for millennia. And that same work was happening now, in every heart that chose to open, in every hand that reached out to help, in every soul that remembered it was part of something infinite. Sam smiled, tears freezing on his cheeks, and whispered into the night, "We are the stones, we are the light, and we are remembering." Perhaps the sky was never above us. Perhaps it was always the light that appears when we stop running from what we know deep down to be true. Sam Carver never saw the being again, but he didn't need to. He carried the encounter with him every day, in the way he moved through the world, in the kindness he showed, in the quiet certainty that humanity was on the verge of something magnificent. Others would see lights in the years to come. Others would have encounters, visions, awakenings. The veil was thinning, and those who were ready would see through it, not to escape this world, but to transform it. Because the truth about Stonehenge, about the Anunnaki, about the Druids, the truth that had been hidden for so long, was not that humanity had been abandoned by its creators. It was that humanity had never needed saving. They had only needed to remember. Remember who they were, remember where they came from, remember that they carried within them the same light that burned in the hearts of stars. And when enough people remembered, when enough hearts awakened, the transformation would come. Not as destruction, but as rebirth. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. Sam lived the rest of his days in that quiet knowing, and when his time finally came, when his body grew old and his breath grew shallow, he closed his eyes without fear, because he knew that death was not an ending. It was simply the next step in the journey, and somewhere beyond the veil, the stones still hummed with ancient light, waiting for the day when all of humanity would hear their song. The winter passed like a dream. Snow fell on the fields of Montana, blanketing the earth in silence, and Sam moved through those cold months like a man walking between worlds. He still tended his farm, still drove into town for supplies, still spoke to neighbors with that quiet politeness that had always defined him. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer felt like he was going through the motions of living. He felt awake, truly awake, perhaps for the first time in his life. People noticed. They couldn't help but notice. There was a light in Sam's eyes now, a calmness in his movements that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within. When he spoke, his words carried weight, not because he tried to sound profound, but because he spoke from a place of genuine presence. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, people found themselves hanging on every word, not because of what he said, but because of what they felt when he said it. The miracles, if they could be called that, continued. Not often, not predictably, but they came. An elderly woman who had been confined to a wheelchair for years stood up after Sam helped her with groceries, her legs suddenly strong and steady. A teenager on the verge of suicide felt an inexplicable peace wash over him after a brief conversation with Sam at the gas station and chose to live. A farmer's dying crops, withered by drought and disease, flourished overnight after Sam walked through the fields, running his hands over the dry stalks. Sam never took credit. When people asked how these things happened, he simply shook his head and said, "I'm just a farmer. I don't have answers. But maybe we're all capable of more than we think. Maybe grace is closer than we realize." But the attention was growing, and with it came fear. It started small, whispers in the diner, suspicious glances at church. A few people began to avoid Sam, crossing the street when they saw him coming, refusing to meet his eyes. The local newspaper ran a small article about the unexplained phenomena occurring around town, carefully avoiding any mention of Sam's name but making it clear enough who they were talking about. Then the pastor, the same young man who had sat on Sam's porch months before, stood up during Sunday service and delivered a sermon that sent shockwaves through the congregation. "We must be vigilant," he said, his voice trembling with conviction. "The Bible warns us that in the last days false prophets will arise. They will perform signs and wonders to deceive even the elect. We must test every spirit, every miracle, every teaching against the Word of God. And if it does not align with Scripture, we must reject it no matter how compelling it seems." Sam, sitting in the back row as he always did, felt every eye in the church turned toward him. He did not flinch, did not argue. He simply stood, quietly, and walked out. He never went back. The division spread. Some in the town believed Sam was a blessing, a sign of God's grace in a dark world. Others believed he was dangerous, a deceiver leading people astray with false miracles and heretical ideas about aliens and ancient gods. Families argued, friendships fractured. The town that had once been united in its quiet, rural simplicity now found itself torn between faith and fear. Sam withdrew, not out of shame or anger, but out of compassion. He didn't want to be the cause of division. He had never wanted any of this. So he stayed on his farm, kept to himself, and waited. For what, he wasn't sure. But he felt it coming like a storm on the horizon, inevitable, powerful, and necessary. It was late March when the second encounter happened. Sam had been working in his barn, repairing a fence panel, when he felt it, the now familiar hum in his chest, the vibration that signaled a presence beyond the ordinary. He set down his tools and walked outside, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and awe. The sky was overcast, heavy clouds blocking out the sun, but there in the middle of his field was a light, not descending this time but already there, waiting. And standing in the light was the being. It looked the same as before, tall, slender, with skin that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that held the weight of eternity. But this time, there was something different in its posture, something urgent. Sam walked toward it, his boots crunching on the frost-covered grass, and stopped a few feet away. "You came back," he said quietly. "I never left," the being replied, and its voice, that chorus of 1,000 voices speaking as one, resonated through Sam's entire body. "I have been watching, waiting. You have done well, Samuel, but the time for waiting is over. The transformation is beginning." Sam's breath caught. "The rapture? That word carries too much baggage," the being said gently. "Too many expectations of judgment and separation. What is coming is not a punishment or a reward. It is an awakening, a shift in consciousness. The frequency of your world is rising, Samuel, and those who are ready will rise with it. Those who cling to fear, to hatred, to division, they will remain, not because they are condemned, but because they have not yet learned to let go." "How do I prepare?" Sam whispered. "How do I help others prepare?" The being reached out and placed a hand over Sam's heart. The touch was warm, electric, and in that instant, Sam saw. He saw the earth from above, spinning in the black void of space, beautiful and fragile and alive. He saw billions of souls, each one a tiny spark of light, connected by invisible threads to every other soul. Some lights burned bright, pulsing with love and compassion. Others flickered weakly, dimmed by pain and fear. But all of them, every single one, was part of the same tapestry, the same cosmic web. And then he saw the shift. It came like a wave, a ripple of energy moving across the planet, and as it passed, the bright lights flared even brighter, while the dim ones remained unchanged. The bright lights began to lift not physically but vibrationally, rising to a higher frequency, a higher state of being. They didn't leave the earth, they transformed it. And those who remained in the lower frequency saw them differently, perceived them as if through a veil, no longer able to fully interact with them. "This is what the ancient texts tried to describe," the being said. "The separation of wheat from chaff, the chosen from the unchosen. But it was never about worthiness, Samuel. It was about readiness, about choosing love over fear, about remembering who you truly are." Sam's vision cleared, and he found himself back in his field, tears streaming down his face. "When?" he asked hoarsely. "When will it happen?" "It is already happening," the being said. "Every moment of kindness, every act of compassion, every choice to forgive instead of condemn, these are the stones of the new Stonehenge. The gateway is being built, one heart at a time, and when enough stones are in place, the threshold will open. Some say months, some say years. But time is an illusion, Samuel. The transformation happens when it is meant to happen." "And Jesus?" Sam's voice broke. "Where is he in all of this?" The being smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Sam had ever seen. "He is everywhere, in you, in the woman you healed, in the child whose life you saved. He was never a single man, Samuel. He is, the embodiment of divine love made manifest, a frequency that entered your world 2,000 years ago and has been spreading ever since. His second coming is not the arrival of a person. It is the moment when humanity finally resonates at his frequency, when you become, collectively, what he showed you was possible." Sam fell to his knees, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he whispered. "Strength is not required," the being said gently. "Only willingness, only openness, only love. You have already done more than you know, Samuel Carver. The ripples you have created will spread far beyond this small town, far beyond this lifetime. You have been a reminder, a living testament to the truth that humanity is not alone, has never been alone, and will never be alone." The being began to fade, its form dissolving into the light. But before it disappeared completely, it spoke one final time. The Anunnaki built Stonehenge as a gift, a reminder, a promise that the Creator does not abandon his children. And now you are building the new Stonehenge, not with stones, but with souls. Keep building, Samuel. Keep remembering, and when the time comes, you will rise with the rest. The light vanished, the clouds parted, and Sam knelt alone in his field, the sun breaking through and warming his tear-streaked face. The weeks that followed were the most intense of Sam's life. He began to have dreams, vivid, overwhelming visions that left him gasping and trembling when he woke. He saw ancient civilizations, their technologies far beyond anything modern humanity had achieved, working in harmony with beings from other worlds. He saw the construction of monuments across the globe, the pyramids, Machu Picchu, the Moai of Easter Island, each one a marker, a beacon, built with the help of those who came from the stars. He saw the Druids in their true form, not primitive pagans, but astronomers and engineers, keepers of wisdom passed down from the Anunnaki. They understood the energies of the earth, the alignment of the stars, the sacred geometry that governed all creation. Stonehenge was their greatest achievement, a machine designed to harmonize human consciousness with cosmic frequencies, to keep the darkness at bay and prepare humanity for the day when they would finally awaken. But he also saw the destruction, the burning of the libraries, the slaughter of the wise ones, the systematic erasure of ancient knowledge by empires that feared what they could not control. Rome, the Church, conquerors and kings who rewrote history to suit their agendas, who turned the sacred into the profane, who buried the truth so deep that it became myth. And he saw the present, the world teetering on the edge of catastrophe, war, disease, environmental collapse, division so deep it seemed irreparable. But he also saw hope, millions of people around the globe waking up, remembering, choosing love over fear. The frequency was rising. The transformation was inevitable. Sam began to write, not because he thought anyone would believe him, but because he needed to get it out, to give form to the overwhelming flood of information pouring into his consciousness. He filled notebook after notebook with drawings, diagrams, equations he didn't fully understand, symbols that looked ancient and alien all at once. And then one day his daughter called. "Dad?" Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. "Are you okay? I've been hearing things about you." Sam sat on his porch, the phone pressed to his ear, and smiled sadly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually. People are saying you've been acting strange, that you're claiming aliens came to you, that you're performing miracles." She paused. "Dad, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should see someone. A doctor or—" "I'm not crazy, Emily," Sam said gently. "I know how it sounds. Believe me, I know. But something happened to me, something I can't explain. But that changed everything. And I need you to know, whatever happens, whatever you hear about me, I love you. And I'm sorry I wasn't a better father after your mum died. I shut down. I shut you out. But I'm awake now, and I want you to know that you are loved. Not just by me, but by something so vast and beautiful that I don't have words for it." There was a long silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Dad, you're scaring me." "I know," Sam whispered. "I'm sorry, but please just remember what I said. When things start to change, and they will change, Emily, sooner than anyone expects, remember that love is the only thing that matters. Not success, not money, not being right. Just love. Can you remember that?" She sounded like she was crying. "I'll try. That's all any of us can do," Sam said softly. "I love you, sweetheart." He hung up before she could respond, and as he sat there watching the sun set over his fields, he knew with absolute certainty that he would never speak to her again. Not in this life, anyway. It happened on a night in early May, when the world was caught between the dying breath of spring and the first warm promise of summer. Sam was alone on his farm, as he had been for weeks now. The town had mostly given up on him, written him off as either a saint or a lunatic, depending on who you asked. He didn't mind. The solitude gave him space to think, to prepare, to simply be. He was sitting on his porch, as always, when he felt it. Not the hum this time, but something else, a pull, a calling, as if the universe itself was reaching out and drawing him forward. He stood and walked into his field, guided by instinct more than thought. And then he saw them. Not one light, but dozens, hundreds, thousands, descending from the sky like stars falling in slow motion, each one a different color, a different frequency. They filled the night with impossible beauty, and as Sam watched, awestruck, he realized he was not alone. People were emerging from their homes all over the world. He could see them somehow, a vision granted by whatever force was orchestrating this moment. Farmers in India, fishermen in Japan, teachers in Brazil, factory workers in China, all of them stepping outside, looking up, witnessing the same impossible sight. And then the lights touched down. Beings emerged. Not just the one Sam had met, but countless others, each unique, each beautiful in ways that defied description. They spread across the globe, appearing to those who were ready, those who had chosen love, those whose hearts had opened wide enough to receive the truth. Sam felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see the being standing beside him, glowing softly in the darkness. "It is time," it said simply. "Time for what?" Sam whispered. "To go home." And then Sam understood. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The transformation he had been told about, the shift that had been building for millennia, was happening now. The veil between worlds was lifting, and those who were ready were being invited to step through. He looked down at his hands and saw that they were glowing, softly at first, then brighter, as if a light had been ignited within him. He looked around and saw others, people he recognized from town, from his past, from dreams he couldn't quite remember, all of them glowing with the same inner radiance. "You are not leaving the earth," the being said gently. "You are transforming it, raising it to a higher frequency. Those who remain in the old frequency will not see you as you are now. They will think you disappeared, vanished, but you will still be here, Samuel. You will simply exist in a state of being they cannot yet perceive." "And them?" Sam asked, thinking of Emily, of the people in town who had rejected him, of the billions across the world who were not yet ready. "What happens to them?" "They continue their journey," the being said, "learning, growing, evolving. There is no judgment, Samuel, no condemnation, only opportunities for growth. Some will awaken in this lifetime, some in the next, but all will eventually come home. The Creator is patient, infinitely patient." Sam felt tears streaming down his face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude, of joy so profound it bordered on pain. Everything he had been through, the loss of his wife, the loneliness, the confusion, the miraculous encounter, it had all led to this moment. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing me, for reminding me." "Thank us by continuing to love," the being said. "In this new state you will have work to do. You will be a guide for those still awakening, a bridge between worlds. Are you ready?" Sam thought of his farm, his daughter, his old life, and then he thought of the vision he'd been shown, of humanity finally remembering who they were, finally stepping into their divine potential, finally becoming the beings of light they had always been meant to be. "Yes," he said, "I'm ready." The being smiled, and then the light intensified, surrounding Sam, filling him, transforming him from the inside out. He felt his body dissolve, not into nothingness, but into everything. He felt his consciousness expand, stretching across the planet, touching every awakened soul, every being of light, every heart that had chosen love over fear. He was no longer just Sam Carver, the wheat farmer from Montana. He was part of something infinite, something eternal, something that had always been and would always be. And in that moment he understood the true meaning of the rapture. Not a disappearance, but a transformation. Not an escape, but a homecoming. Not an ending, but a beginning. The stones of Stonehenge had been placed by ancient hands, guided by cosmic wisdom, as a promise, a reminder that humanity was not alone, that they were loved, that they were destined for something greater. And now, that promise was being fulfilled. In a small apartment in Seattle, Emily Carver woke with a start, her heart racing. She had been dreaming of her father, standing in a field of light, smiling at her with a peace she had never seen in him before. And as she lay there in the darkness, she felt it, a warmth in her chest, a presence that seemed to say without words, "I love you, I'm okay, and one day you'll understand." She began to cry. though she didn't know why. And as the sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, she made a decision. She would go back to Montana. She would visit her father's farm, and maybe, just maybe, she would find some answers. But when she arrived 3 days later, the house was empty. The fields were still, and her father was nowhere to be found. The truck was still parked by the barn. His clothes were still in the closet. His coffee mug still sat on the porch railing, as if he'd just set it down a moment ago. But Sam Carver was gone. The police investigated. The newspapers ran stories. Theories abounded. He'd wandered off and gotten lost. He'd had a breakdown. He'd staged his own disappearance. But no trace of him was ever found, no body, no evidence. Just an empty farmhouse and a town full of people who couldn't agree on whether he had been a saint or a madman. Emily stayed at the farm for weeks, searching for clues, searching for answers. And one night, as she sat on the porch where her father had sat so many times before, she looked up at the stars and felt it. The hum, the vibration, the presence. And she understood. Her father hadn't disappeared. He had transformed. And one day, when she was ready, she would too. Around the world, others noticed. People who had been touched by the awakened ones, who had received healings or visions or moments of inexplicable grace. They began to gather, to share their stories, to realize that they were not alone. A movement formed, not organized or structured, but organic, flowing like water, finding its level. They called themselves the Rememberers, and their mission was simple: to live as the awakened ones had lived, with love, with compassion, with open hearts and open minds. They didn't preach. They didn't proselytize. They simply lived differently, and in doing so they began to change the world, slowly at first, then faster. The frequency continued to rise. More people awakened, more hearts opened, and with each awakening, the veil grew thinner, until one day it would disappear entirely. The Anunnaki had planted the seeds millennia ago. The Druids had tended them. Jesus and countless other teachers had watered them with wisdom and love. And now, finally, humanity was beginning to bloom. Stonehenge still stood on the plains of England, ancient and mysterious, a monument to a truth that had been forgotten and was now being remembered. And in fields and cities across the world, new Stonehenges were being built, not of rock, but of souls, not by aliens or ancient builders, but by ordinary people choosing to live extraordinarily. The transformation was not complete. It would take time, generations perhaps, but it had begun, and nothing could stop it now. Perhaps the truth about the Druids was not that they worshipped false gods or practiced dark magic. Perhaps they were simply the keepers of a knowledge too vast, too profound, to be contained by fear and dogma. Perhaps they understood what we are only now beginning to remember, that we are not separate from the divine, but expressions of it, that the stars are not distant and cold, but alive with consciousness, that the universe is not a machine but a symphony, and we are all notes in the song. Perhaps the Anunnaki were not conquerors or deceivers, but teachers and gardeners, planting seeds of potential across countless worlds, nurturing civilizations toward awakening. Perhaps Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and all the great teachers were not competing prophets, but different voices speaking the same truth, that love is the only force that matters, that we are all one, that the kingdom of heaven is not a place we go to when we die, but a state of being we can enter right now. Perhaps Stonehenge and all the other ancient monuments were not built to glorify gods or kings, but to remind us of who we are, to call us home. And perhaps Sam Carver, the humble wheat farmer from Montana, was exactly what the world needed, a reminder that the extraordinary lives within the ordinary, that miracles are not violations of natural law, but expressions of a deeper law we have yet to fully understand, and that awakening is not reserved for the saints and mystics, but available to anyone who chooses to open their heart. The stars still spin in their ancient dance. The earth still turns. And somewhere, in a frequency just beyond our current perception, Sam Carver smiles, knowing that the work continues, that the transformation is unfolding exactly as it should, and that one day all of humanity will finally come home.